It's 12 o'clock in Frisco, Texas, and it's time for Smoker Broker Radio with Robert Mesh, a.k.a. the Smoker Broker. Robert is the owner of Small World Realty and has employed hundreds of real estate agents in his 17-year career. He has instructed and mentored over 10,000 real estate agents at the highly acclaimed Champions School of Real Estate and is considered an expert in Texas residential realty. Robert is also an advocate of true entrepreneurial spirit and has helped many to transition from corporate America into the world of self-employment. And now live from the studio to your world, the Smoker Broker.
Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mesh, and I'm the guy they call Smoker Broker. There are not many of us out there, real estate brokers, large teams, competitive barbecue, semi-professional, going up against professionals. It's a weird combination, but it works. It's memorable. There's a lot of people that recognize the name, and I love having it. Happy Thursday. Hope everybody is doing well. We are running and gunning into the summer. I am literally shocked that we are in July. I can't, to myself, believe that we're here. I don't know where time goes. I don't know what happens. I know I work a lot. I know I work hard, and maybe that's why I tend to lose track of where we are. But the fact is, we are in July. And I see George over there too. So we got.
Hey, I'm promoting you.
Yeah, I know. I love it. So we go through, and another thing. That part of the reason why I think it's where I'm struggling with July is that in Texas, our broadcast goes across the country, but a lot of our listeners are in the state of Texas. But we have not had the heat that we normally have at this time, and we had probably one of the most mild July 4th that I've seen in years here. So I guess it's just maybe a month or two off that's keeping me away. Maybe it's because the housing market really just continues with no brakes on it at all. It just keeps running through at a rampant pace. And we're going to definitely talk about that today. I usually keep going through a longer intro, and I am going to come back to it, but I hate when I have someone who's so important that's on the side that comes in, and I don't like to go through my whole intro without introducing my guest. We are very fortunate today. I only have guests so often these days because I try to mix in the content of the real estate and teaching real estate, but a lot of times we try to base this show, and the show is originally based off of entrepreneurship, working your way through things, corporate, getting away from corporate, working for yourself, being independent, all the things that strive for someone to be successful, be able to go off on their own. And the guy I have on as a guest today, he's been with us before, but he's such a unique, educated gentleman, and his message is so strong. He would be the first one to tell you that he tells it like it is. He does no sugarcoating to it at all, and you have to appreciate people that are like that. He has the most tiered career, and so many things that he's done and successes with, from radio host to businesses, successful businesses, to where he is now working in the lending business, which he's going to talk about that a little bit today as we mix in some of our conversation. But I got to tell you, it's a treat for everybody today. The show gets watched a lot on archive, and usually when I push it out, I always have a message as to why someone should watch it. But today, the real message is going to be listening to the guests that we have, and just me having minor connection to. He's going to really drive a lot of the conversation because he's such an expert in these areas, but it affects us in real estate too. So it's really a treat for the listeners that we have, because you're really going to get it from someone who knows exactly how all this stuff works. So I want to introduce my good friend over here, George DiGianni. He is just, like I said, it's a pleasure to always get to catch up with him. It's a pleasure to listen to him. I can promise you this, he is not the average conversation that you have every day. George, it is good to see you, buddy. How are you?
Thanks, man. I'm doing well. I always wonder how I'm going to start the intro, because I write content and I like to make sure it's really compelling. But you mentioned how I've had successful businesses, and if I'm the person watching, I'm thinking right away, if this person's really so successful, why are they a lender now? Not that lenders aren't successful, but right. I've had a couple of very, very successful businesses, and now I'm doing this. And just kind of circle back for people who don't know me. I had a very successful business that was online from 2005 to 2014. and it did extraordinarily well. It was hacked one day. I didn't have the opportunity to sell it. So 9 months later, I launched a software company in the genetic space, put a team together, raised $3.1 million. And that did really well. August of 2019, we were profitable, had an offer on the table to buy my company. In January of 2020, COVID hit. 52 years old, I had to start over again. And so I share that with you, number one, because I'm transparent. Number two, to say, look, I've been there before, I can do it again. I'm not worried about it. It just stinks because by this time, this year, I was supposed to be retired, right? Last year. So I share that because since I'm starting it again, I had to go back to my mind and the foundation of starting a business. And every single realtor, every single lender, every person who's a 1099 owns a business. And if you own a business, you have to first, before you get involved in the business, before you go lease a space, before you buy product, before you put your marketing message together, you need to know how you're going to capture share, market share. How are you going to capture clients? Why should they use you? And so I taught over 50 of your realtors. We had a great seminar. By the way, I'm putting together a curriculum right now. There's CEs connected to it. There's 2 CEs. It's 2 hours.
I can't wait.
Yeah, Trek's going to approve it. But with everything else I have going on, it's just taking longer than I anticipated to put it out. So you understand my message. Many of people on your team have heard my message, but it often falls on deaf ears, and that's unfortunate because there are people who struggle and they wonder why they struggle. And they don't want to do the work that it takes to become successful. It's not unlike, and so forgive me for saying this, but I was in health and wellness for 29 years, so I easily default to these scenarios. It's not unlike a very fat person who says, "Oh, let me try your program. Let me be a guinea pig, and once I lose all this weight, I'll promote you." And then you give them the tools and they don't use them. Why? Several reasons. Perceived value comes into play, number one. Number two, you've given them the answer. You actually gave them the answer and they weren't ready for change. Therefore, they have these emotional impediments that prevented them from getting the success they want. So with all of that said, I made sure that I went back to what I know as a business, to create a business, to identify my distinct competencies as a lender. What sets me apart from every other lender in the United States? Why should you use me? And we've gone through this many times. And then also, what's my value proposition? What value do I have to offer you that will make you want to use me? There has to be reciprocity in a relationship. I don't want to just take. And I don't want you just to take. There needs to be reciprocity. And if your lender's not doing that, they're just giving you good rates. Anybody can give you good rates. They're giving you good service. Anybody can give you good service because we're supposed to do that anyway. What are we doing that's unique? So if you listen to the message I'm sharing with you, it's not the George show. It's an example of what businesses, individuals need to do to set themselves apart to become successful again. And there are certain things that you need to do to gain that level of success. And we'll go through some of those things here in a little bit. So
yeah, your intro, I love it. I'm never, there's very few people that I sit and listen to that I actually will take notes on, especially in the real estate side of it, because I've seen most of it. And, I've had an extensive business career too. So, you hear a lot of the same things. But it seems with you, I always end up writing more notes. And, just a couple points for the listeners out there, because we're going to expand on these things as we talk about some of our subject matter today. But he mentions a couple things that are very near and dear to me, and I follow the same processes with my characteristics, and probably not a surprise why me and George get along and see eye to eye on a lot of things. He talks about differentiating himself. We're going to talk a lot about success, being on your own, and entrepreneurship in the next hour or so. And when you start talking about how do you do that, there are so many things, but one of them for sure is how different are you from the other person? I mean, it's pure common sense that if you do it just like everybody else, you're going to get what everybody else gets. And most entrepreneurs and people who are set on being successful usually won't keep that standard. They don't like that. Their standard's higher. They have a higher standard. They thrive for a higher standard. And I love how he mentions that, because I'm a big believer in that too, that you have to do something different. A lot of people have always asked the creation of how I did SWR, which was originally Small World Realty. I mean, there really wasn't much of a trick to it, but you better believe it was different than everybody else. I noticed that a lot of brokers just turn their heads towards some people who are part-time real estate agents. And the fact that I started off like that and eventually became successful, I've always known that there is a route for those types of people. So I focused on that. Of course, I have full and part-time agents, but it became a niche and it was something that's different. And that was really a key to a lot of things that helped me build on to what I eventually did. So I love that one. He always mentioned the other one too. And this is big, not only with me, but also in the Keller Williams world and all of the other large businesses out there. He talks about value proposition. You know, value prop is probably the most understated word out there, because I don't think people really recognize how important it is. When someone's talking about value, and especially when it talks about value added, they are kind of mixing that differentiation that we just talked about, basically saying, well, what is it that you can do for me that's going to help me? And that is a real key component in the businesses that you're doing, especially if it's entrepreneurial and startups and something you're doing on your own. You've got to be able to show someone, why would I do this? Why would I do this? What is it for me? And how, and not only is it, what is it for me? How much is it going to improve? See, a lot of people will tell you when you give them a value, they're like, I can see that, but it might not be the value that they really need. They might be like, well, we can get that anywhere. And I know George is going to talk about that because he knows all these things. And that's why it's so great to listen to his intro, because, nobody will take me as short-winded. I talk all the time, but God, I see his stuff and I'm just like, yes, absolutely. That's right. A couple more things, and I kind of want to link everything we're talking to into the subject and let George get going with some of these things in here. He also mentioned about things always being in a two-way street. I think that's another important part of business. And I think these all match together, because when you start talking about two-way streets, it can't, if you're going to add value to somebody, the expectation is value comes back your way too. It just doesn't, you can't just keep giving value to somebody and they don't return some type of favor that way. It's got to be a two-way street. It doesn't mean that it has to be an even street, but it's got to be something in there. There's got to be something, there's a connection and effort. And I think that's the key word, an effort into that two-way street. And all too often in the real estate world, that is commonly mistaken with the vendors that are involved, because sometimes it does become a one-way street. And the final thing as we get into these subjects today, he mentions a really important thing, and he does it so nonchalantly because he's done it so many times and he's a pro at it. But notice how he talks about starting over. He doesn't have regret in his tone. He doesn't have disappointment. It's a matter of fact that a lot of times we have to start over. And it's not fearful of age anywhere. Starting over for some people is 18. Starting over for some people is 50. Starting over for some people is 85. I mean, there are really different locations where you're at when you start over. The bottom line is there are times where you have to recognize that I've got to go a different way. This didn't work out. It did work out. It's had its time. Sometimes some of the things that you don't do anymore, it's not because they didn't work out. Maybe they worked out really good and they're past, and you need to start looking for the next thing. So I love how he always talks about that, because his background is extremely cultured in what he's done. I mean, he has been a part of so many larger people, which is why another reason why y'all have a treat. George usually is probably a pretty expensive discussion with the amount of people that he's handled over his time. But when you have that, you mix in some Harvard education in there and the people that he's dealt with, it's hard not to listen to someone like that. And that was actually my original happiness when I met George, is that this guy's so interesting. It's so hard not to, I've met a lot of people in my life, but he's one of the few that has those backgrounds that all connect. So for me, it's always a great pleasure to go through that. So we talked about, me and George, on what topics we could do. And there's millions that me and him can go over all the time. But one of the ones that he asked me, what should we go through? And a good idea he came up with was talking about the biggest challenges that we're seeing right now in the real estate market. And I like that because, one, we do have some major challenges, but I really liked it because not only was it the challenges, but it also talked about a lot of the entrepreneurial and management things that we've been discussing in the intro that aid in these processes. So we want to talk about those things. And there's only so many we can talk about. George was smart enough to say, look, we probably should just talk about 2, because if we talk about any more, it's just going to get out of hand. So George, that's what I want to do right now. I want to start off with talking about some of the biggest challenges that real estate agents are having, because a majority of our audiences are agent centered, and a lot of them are, well, they're either agents or they're managers of the agents that they send saying you should watch this one. One of the biggest problems out there, and what is the biggest one, that's why I chose it, is getting listings right now inside of this particular market. Everybody should be well aware, because we are so deep into it, that there is a very low level of inventory in the state of Texas, all the major metropolitan areas. And it's not just the state of Texas. It actually is now worldwide. I was reading something in Forbes, I believe yesterday or the day before, that they do believe now that we are looking at a worldwide housing bubble. Now, I didn't care for that word because I'm like, well, that's not true. There's some areas that are bubbles and some are not, but there's no doubt the increase of price is a worldwide thing. So because of that, when we're out there, if the houses are low on inventory, it means there's not as many out there for us to sell. And that means that the people that we're trying to get into, our guys have trouble picking up some of those listings. And that has become very difficult. Now, George has a lot of levels of expertise, and he's not so much going to go into the real estate agent and what they're doing as far as the real estate process goes, but he is certainly going to address that problem. What are some of the things they could do from a general standpoint? And then I'll link it into how it's affecting our guys on the real estate side. So, George, what are some initial thoughts with that? Those guys are having problems right now. What is it that they should be looking at and doing in their head mentally and in actuality to get out there and fix some of these things?
So while you were talking, Robert, and went through my mind, I took my own mental notes. Back in March, in the United States, there were 1,488,000 realtors. Product on the market was 1,040,000. Okay. One of the things that you talked about people struggle with when it comes to being an entrepreneur, especially a realtor, is that they're not doing things their own way. And I think when you get into any new business, even if you're not self-employed, you want to learn as much as possible. Therefore, you ask people who are knowledgeable and been in the business. The challenge with that is you're listening to implants from others about how you should do it, right? And since you don't know any better, you begin to do that. And you find, people tend to find that the way we should go about getting leads, what we should say to potential clients or prospects, often fall on deaf ears. They don't work as well, especially in this market with all this competition. Going forward a little bit, where you talk about how I say, I've fallen and I can get back up and I can do this again. As a matter of fact, the reason I'm able to do that, which I do in all of my talks, is it's important that I impart my foundational knowledge on you, because when you have these tools, if you get knocked down, you can come up again. You can't blame the economy. You can't blame anybody else. You blame yourself, because
you
when
said the key word too, foundation. It's foundational.
It
I
is.
think you said that.
Yeah, and a lot of people are afraid to be introspective and employ these tools. They're afraid to adopt them. They're in their own way. So there's so many people who are afraid of success. I talk to realtors all the time when I train them, and some say, when I always ask the question, how many transactions do you want to have this year? And I get anywhere from 8 to 36. And what I have known throughout my life is when people say a high number, that's because they have a self-worth, a belief that they can have 36. Even if they don't reach that goal, that's their belief. If you have a limiting belief, then your confidence is in the way of you being successful. You'll miss many opportunities for the success you seek. So when it comes to getting listings now moving forward, I think people are afraid to sell today for several reasons, because that's the biggest pain point that I hear is they can't get listings because people are afraid to sell. because if they sell and they have a large profit, what are they going to do with their money in this market? Are they going to be able to get a home and put some of that money away? Is a home going to be available? Is it going to be in the area they want? What's going to happen to their home? Is someone going to knock it down? So I posted something yesterday. Everybody listening right now, find George DiGianni on Facebook and LinkedIn.
I actually saved it too, because there were some interesting comments and I took a picture of it.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
So it's all about negotiating. Well, it's not all about negotiating, but it's identifying questions about the pain points and the desires of people who don't want to sell. So let's say you knock on a door, there's no for sale sign. You want to entice them to sell their home. Okay. Why would they sell their home? You first have to identify what their pain points are and their desires. Some people want the most money out of their home. Some like the area and the area they're in, and they just don't want to move. And some just don't want their house demolished. So I want to give you, like I mentioned earlier, but I want to give you an example of a realtor once asked me a few weeks ago if we can close in 21 days. And before answering that, I asked why, right? So I didn't answer yes or no, just try to get the business. I asked why. So that my negotiating started immediately. And he said he wanted to use it as a bargaining tool. And I asked, did the seller ask for that? And he said no. You see where the negotiation started already?
Mm-hmm.
So in a negotiation, we must first identify the pain point and make sure that each party understands what's known as a ZOPA. So in Harvard Business School, Deepak Malhotra was my negotiation professor, and he has this acronym called a ZOPA, Zone of Possible Agreements. Is there a possible agreement between me, the buyer, and you, the seller, or vice versa? If there is, then we move forward, okay? In that process, you have to learn about the other person or each person's BATNA, again, acronym, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So we've already identified that there's a possible deal here. Now we have to identify what the leverage is of each party the best we can.
Yeah, and I want to tell you, your takeaway points that, we do a lot of takeaway points on here, and with George, your hand can break with takeaway points. I'm going to tell you one that he really said there that was a key to that beginning segment. He talked about pain points. Pain points. In real estate, you should be able to identify those issues when you're in there, because that is one of there is a barrier that is holding us up right now. That barrier is, in fact, this person does not want to sell their house for some reason. We had better figure out what that reason is if we even have some intent. And then, he very nicely links it into his next takeaway, where he's identified that the option is there and there's a possibility for this. And now he moves on to the next phase. So he is really inside of a listing presentation. He's talking, he's trying to identify, but now he's trying to find out there might be something here. Now I can expand. And he does such a great job of bringing those things in. So those are really good 2 takeaways for them. George, go ahead with where you were going on there.
Yeah, that's fine. So then the last part was BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So what leverage does each party have? How badly do they want it, whatever it is? And how can you please them? So listen to this is really important. How can you please the other side without compromising your client's desires or giving something away they didn't ask for? So in a negotiation, this is very hard. It was hard for me, and it's hard for many people. You always want the other side to win. You want them to win. The ego gets in the way, and we always want to win. We want them to have nothing. We want our client to have everything. But that's not how normal negotiations go.
That's right.
If you ever watch the police officer negotiate with someone who's holding hostages, they have a little give at certain points. You do want them to feel like they're winning, but you should feel like you're winning as well. Okay, so you don't want to try to negotiate an entire list ever. You negotiate point by point. So when you negotiate a point. You might have won one, done. You put it aside. You don't revisit it. They might have won one. You put it aside. You don't revisit it. Okay, you keep moving to the next one. So people who want to sell their home and are concerned about not having enough money, I advise, you might not like this, Robert, but I advise them to consider delayed gratification the mindset of selling their home now, holding on to those monies that they'll not ever likely have again in our lifetime, this abundance of money for what homes are selling for now, hold on to that money, rent a place. So maybe you can make money with rentals after you've sold their home. And then you'll have more people with more money later on. So you get to go back to these people when the market calms down and changes. So the interest rates will rise, less product on the market. I mean, more product on the market. And you'll be able to have these people during a time that you've become strategic with, rather than trying to do it all now.
And I'm not against that. It's funny, in these type of markets, we adjust as well to the spiel that we give. And a lot of times that spiel does have to be adjusted to making the proposition that, look, maybe we should get it now where we think we're going to get the maximum amount of money. And for those that fit into this category, maybe if you can hold off on it for a little while, maybe it does make sense for you to sit this out and rent for a little while and see what comes through while you have this amount of money, and you can do whatever you want to with that money in the meantime, but something else along the way is going to be a better situation that will benefit you. That is a true possibility for some people. And, with real estate, and I think this is one of the great things of the many about real estate, sometimes income, even if you don't have it right now, it doesn't mean that it's not eventually coming. A lot of our income is held up in a timeline somewhere. If you're doing accounting, you could only almost have it as estimated, accounts receivable coming in, because it will come in, but it's a matter of when. And sometimes that could be a year or two down the road. So I love that. That's not a negative comment. We actually follow that rule sometimes right now.
I think the challenge, and this is more identifying desires and pain points, and having this conversation with your clients, but it's someone who wants to buy a home but has fear of buying a home because of how much the homes are going for now. So we know BlackRock and other large investment portfolios have purchased 17,000 homes. Okay, that's one portfolio, by the way. They're doing that because they see what's going on with the economy. The inflation is just running rampant, and they know there are a lot of people who are going to default, and they want to have all these rental homes. They're doing the same thing they did in 2008. So it's just a mimic of that. They see what's coming. So it's important when you're trying to get someone to buy to ask them questions to identify what a real pain point is. Is the pain point that you don't want to pay so much more for the house, which you can pay off in whenever you'd like? So let's say a house costs $40,000 or $50,000 more than you would normally pay for it. Or is the pain point where the interest rate is 0.5% or 0.75% higher? Now, the way I look at it is I'd rather pay $50,000 more for a house, and I just use that as a number, a reference. I'd rather do that than put more toward my house every single month. I don't care if it's $100 more per month, and break the payment up twice in 1 month, so you don't make two payments. You make two payments, but it's the same monthly payment broken up in 2 months. You actually decrease the amount of time you spend that on that loan. But I would rather do that than have a higher interest rate that you can't change. Give me the more money I'm going to pay on a house where I can pay it down whenever I want than a 30-year mortgage at 0.5% or 0.75% higher.
Yeah, you just have more freedom in the management of what it is that you're doing. And, conservative people will be more aggressive inside. They're trying to make sure that comes down, but they also know if they need it, they still have it on the side. The extra money, at least it's in their hands versus just torn up in some god awful knows how long time frame in there. So
right, you're empowering them, but you're empowering them first by identifying their desires and their pain points.
Yeah,
right.
And
so
you mentioned a couple things that I wanted to talk about too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just so many ridiculously great comments. The one that I found great interest in, I've been talking a lot about it, and I was curious on your opinion of it. You mentioned Blackstone and all the other big guys out there right now that are purchasing all these houses up, and there is without a doubt this is causing some of the housing shortage, that you have conglomerates and huge syndicates that are purchasing homes. And some of the topics I've had over the last probably 3 or 4 months have hinted on the fact that the American dream is somewhat in jeopardy right now. It has always been, and I think it always will be, the American dream to own a home. That was the foundation of what this country was built on, to have the freedom to get your land and purchase your house. And really, for the first time, really in the history of this country, that is a severe threat, because it is a fact. There are some people right now that have good credit, have decent savings, reasonable debt, and a good job, and they can't get a house. And
rent went up 7% the first quarter of this year.
It did, which, some people they shrug their shoulders, and I'm like, that's like really excessive. I mean, because now you have a counterattack. You have an issue where I can't buy a house, but now I'm paying more for not living the American dream. Now I'm really stuck. And this is where you really get into the foundations of economics and, inflation. But we do have people right now that can't do it. And what I wanted your opinion on is, a long time ago, HUD had this issue in their own, HUD, for the listeners out there, especially some of the agents, sometimes you don't get involved in this, but when HUD sells off their foreclosures, they are selling off the foreclosed VA and FHA loans. They're selling their government loans off. And they have a program in place that was originally designed to take those homes and make sure it got to first-time home buyers at a reasonable discount, and it was more flexible getting them in. Well, over the years, investors picked up on that, so they got in there and started purchasing those homes and bought them as flips and rentals, and it got to a point where now it wasn't a first-time home buyer anymore. It was a renter it was a conglomerate that was buying the house up. So the federal government stepped in and they initiated what they called the owner-occupant rule. They said you have to at least live in there. I want to say it was 9 months originally, but then I think it became a year. And then they also put other rules in there, and they actually called them the anti-flipping rules, where you had to take 3 months before you could do it. These were designed to put a hesitation and a stop to people buying it up. I'm curious right now if we think it's a possibility that this might very well happen, that the government in the next few months might take a viewpoint of maybe we need to put that rule in place right now overall. I'm curious what you think about that.
I think it's kind of hard to say, because if I had another person on here who is an expert in the same field, they might disagree. And
hey, my guys disagree with me too, so I love it. That's fine.
Yeah, but I think what I'm getting at is, when you're in a court of law, both sides are very believable, right? You'll hear the defendant's side speak, and now all of a sudden you're on the defendant's side. Then you hear the prosecutors, now you're on the prosecutor's side. So I don't like to influence anyone on this, because we don't know. All I can say is, factually, when we default in our debt, there's a significant cost increase of doing business. Okay, so it's cost of borrowing for firms, for individuals, right? We have higher interest rates on loans and bonds, and so it affects everything, the entire economy. So that's why I mentioned earlier, if someone's afraid to pay more for a house now, but they really want a house, buy the house now, because Q4 of this year, it looks like things are going to change a lot.
You said something too in there that was in the news this past week. The U.S. Treasury Secretary came out and said, we have a sincere concern right now that if we don't pay our bills, something traumatic could happen to the economy. And, you have right now what most people consider to be a economy with a pretty good engine right now, and it's gearing up after its lapse from COVID. Yeah. But I found the article interesting because she put the brakes on. She's like, hey, we owe a lot of money right now.
28 trillion.
Yeah. And that what you just said, it was exactly that same point she made. She basically said that, hey, it's going to go up. This is not, you can't just print all this money, owe all these people without having some way of paying it. And, we're getting to where the piper's about to be paid. So you were going right down. It's funny. I had that note to talk to you when you said, I go, that's it. That is exactly what we're talking about.
Well, but now it ties back into the individual, the realtor, okay, even the mortgage broker. It ties into each person, because during these times we have to be that introspective person. We need to identify those distinct competencies, because a lot of people are going to fall out of this market when it becomes too hard. Okay. And I don't know how many, and I don't know who that is, but if you have foundational tools, you'll be able to stay in, because you're going to pick up where other people left. And so personally, people know when you like yourself, when you respect yourself. They know when you're timid, right? They know when you allow others to take advantage of you. You give off that aura about you. The way you communicate, whether or not you set boundaries, who you accept into your inner circle, all reflects on how others see you. So remember a long time ago, well, sometime in April, I guess, more when I spoke to your group, I said, people who like you will listen, but people who respect you will take action. And so if you're not the person who does the work that I'm mentioning here and have mentioned many times in the past, and you're not great with communicating, and you're not doing all this foundational work, you'll have people like friends and colleagues and even family members who will use other people for their realtor, because you've not done the work to set the foundation to make yourself be respected in this industry anyway. But it's really in any business. So when I went out to raise $3.1 million for my software company, I had never done it before. And I knew that I have certain strengths and weaknesses, and I needed to find people who had the strength to fill the gaps in my weaknesses and bring them on board for my team. And I did that, and we made quite a successful software company, and we were the whale in the industry until COVID hit. So we need that humility and need to have business foundational tools and do the things that are uncomfortable we don't want to do. Otherwise, it's okay. You don't have to do it, but good luck with the success that you seek. But it's because it's going to be ever elusive.
You resonate another message on one of the mega agents in Keller Williams. And I don't know why I call him that. He is the mega agent in Keller Williams. He operates his own thing inside of Keller. Ben Kinney is a huge real estate conglomerate, but he always, one of my favorite things that he does, and it's what you were just talking about, he will give the entire world his entire game plan. He will say, this is exactly what I did. If you want to know where my wealth is, if you want to know where my success is, here are all my secrets. And you have people all the time go, I don't know why he does that. Well, his answer is very simple. He goes, because I know not one of you will do shit about it to get it done. And he is so right. And, you know, a lot of people listen to him and they're like, oh, that's a little bit harsh. He is, and he has some similarities with you on that, with the being very strong-willed about, hey, look, I'm trying to make a point that it's true. And he is right. You can tell someone all day long, this is exactly what you got to do, but I'll be damned if they don't go out there and do it.
That's right. And there, like I said, there are these emotional impediments. People get in their own way and they don't want to do it. But people who are real, true entrepreneurs that have to fight for their food because they don't have either a significant other or family money, or they don't just get by and they really have to fight. They do these things.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I don't like to ever look at myself in one way or another. I don't like to form opinions of myself in any way, but I will tell you that under that same premise, you will rarely see my desk not have multiple Post-its all over it. And they're just random thoughts that go through my head as to, hey, maybe that's something that could be done. Maybe this might improve this. Maybe this is something that's never been done. Some of them are stupid. Sometimes I go back and go, that's just a dumb idea. But just naturally, that's something I do. I mean, it's not that I was ever taught. I was like, you know, I should continue to look for something better. I should continue to look for something to improve this process. And it's not like, you know, we do fairly well with where we're at. That never is good enough for me. I'm always looking for what is out there that could be better, that could be improved, and that we can carry on. I mean, I do that naturally. I just love, it makes me feel good when I hear someone who's such a professional as you go through, well, those are some of the standards in that. You know, I like the fact that I do that. It makes me feel good about the things that I do sometimes.
Well, it's during the seminar when I taught a lot of your group, when I talked about your nature and your nurture, not one versus the other, but you're naturally that you don't have to think of. It's just part of who you are. And then you nurture all your knowledge and skills that you've acquired. So those are the things you do naturally that comes to you. We really can't teach that to someone. I guess you can, but then they have to adopt it, right?
They have to have discipline on the other end.
Yeah.
They have to have the other components of characteristics that would help them carry that.
Right. And so until you have staying power, staying capital, you're going to have to do the things you don't want to do. Admin, right? All the data entry, all the things you don't want to do, you have to do. You don't have to do anything, but if you really want that success, and I find people who have the entrepreneurial mindset, it is never enough. Even when I had millions of dollars, it was never enough. Yeah. And it's not about the money. It's about the drive. It's about, I can do better. I can do more. I can help more people. Here are the people I can impact. I can do more mentoring, right? It gives me the freedom to mentor, to give money away, to donate, right? So
am I successful? Am I being successful with what I'm doing? Does money pile up more or less, or am I being successful? What am I doing? That is a more key metric to look at than anything else.
Well, I've had a few young realtors that I've trained over the last 6 months or so, and maybe 3. And every one of them says, well, I just don't care about money. Money's not my driver. And you can tell where they're coming from, that it's about humanity and giving back and so on and so on. And that's fine, but it's still a limiting behavior, a limiting belief. And I always say to them, through questions, and it's part of negotiation, tell me what you like. What are the things you like to do for other people? And then they'll rattle off a bunch of things. So how many people have you helped with those things? Well, I have my YouTube channel. I've helped 1,000 people, or some people say, I help 100 people a week with, volunteering over here. And that's great. I said, what if you could 10X that, 1,000X that? Whoa, I'd love that. I wonder if money could help. See, if you
it doesn't have to be the ends to the means. It doesn't have to be the evilness of it. There can be a place for it,
right,
to support their philanthropy.
You don't have to get down on yourself because you have a lot of money. You can help a lot more people. If you want to live paycheck to paycheck and struggle and give all your money away, that's fine. But now you're helping more people because you've become more of a success. If we don't adopt this mindset, we limit our success. Therefore, we limit helping other people. And therefore, in my opinion, you're being selfish.
Yes. There's a lot to that. And I think that's a horrible mistake for a lot of people. Once you start getting too involved in yourself, when you start looking at your own needs, you forget the needs of everybody else, especially if you are a leader, responsible for people. I've never been shy about the reason why we converted my independent group back into Keller Williams. It was completely out of the fact that I thought I started to become selfish because I had everything on cruise control. I didn't have to do as much as I had done to build it. Funny, you build it all up and you work so hard, and then you get there and you're like, this is fine. I don't have to do anything else. And it goes to cruise control. But that doesn't mean that everybody below you or with you or working with you is still benefiting. And I got to a point where I'm like, you're not doing anything for them. And it is a selfish act that a lot of people that are executives or team leads or managers of a lot of people, they get to that point, and it's not a good thing. It's a terrible weakness, and you have to be able to register it and identify it and get rid of it as soon as you can.
So something you just said is identify it. To identify something, you must first be aware. And awareness is an extraordinarily powerful tool. I think there are many people who lack awareness and often put blame on others for their ... whatever it is, okay? So in my past experience, I recognized when people didn't take me seriously, and I realized through introspection and awareness that I just simply wasn't prepared. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know my distinct competencies. I didn't know the value I offered. I always had the attributes there to succeed, but I didn't know how to recognize and package it until I took a look and took the time into who I am, what my values are, what I have that's distinct from everyone else, to utilize those tools and package them in a manner that adds values to someone's life before I ask for value from them.
I want to give you a pitch right there for you. I want to do something for you on this because I genuinely mean it. Now, y'all, you just heard what he said. George is a man of many talents. His profession is lending, and that's actually the association we have is because of our competencies that they complement each other for lending to real estate, and that is our primary relationship in there. But he he has a very powerful message in himself. And there's two things there are a lot of things I like about him, but he just mentioned one of them. He talks about, identifying the things he needs to do inside of himself, the things that he has to find. I think for a lot of agents out there, one of the toughest things is they go through the real estate schools and the real estate markets. They're not taught the business side of this, and they're not taught how to identify. I was very fortunate the path I took. Most people know I worked with the executive team in the accounting side with Foot Locker, Foot Action USA, Just For You. Well before I did this, I was well aware of the business side ever before I got to the sales side, which I would always highly recommend it should go that way. But you have so many people that have never learned to do that. They don't know how to pull within. They don't know how to lead. They don't know what attributes they have that are good. They don't know that sometimes their weaknesses are not a bad thing if they can identify them. George is one of the best at pulling that stuff out, and there's another thing I wanted to link into that same conversation that he really shines with, and I think it's evident with anybody who watches, is that there are so many people that have self-esteem and confidence issues. You want to talk about the last person in the freaking world that breeds that when you're talking to him is this guy over here. Is that his confidence level, and look, let me tell you, and I get this a lot myself, and I talk a lot about this on my shows and things. There's a huge difference. So there's a lot of people that will sometimes say, hey, you're a little bit arrogant there. I'm like, go easy on that arrogant stuff. I go, don't ever mistake my confidence for being arrogant. I go, I am very confident in what I do every single day. There's nothing.
Let me just say this, Robert. Confidence is I can do this. Arrogance is I'm the only one who could do this.
I saw that. You had that on one of your posts, I think, because I read that either today or yesterday or something, and I was like, I want to talk to him about that because there's a lot of truth in it, and there's so many people from a sales perspective that struggle so hard there. George will help on those types of sides, and his whole thing is giving value, so he gets a lot of the other things that come with that, which supported business. But I want to make sure a lot of people realize it's not just the lending side that his strength is. There are so many people that could use that type of service and combine the lending services with them. The agents out there, you really, you should reach out to George, at some point in time, because his talents are well beyond what we're doing, but it also carries into the lending side of it too. So I wanted to throw that pitch out there.
Thank you for sharing that. So
George,
I was
give him we still have about 10 minutes or so. Give him like a 7 or 8 minute kind of combination of things that we're discussing today. And every time I do the show with you, I hate it in the most great way, because we could just go on for literally 2 or 3 days. And I probably need to do a better job bringing you back more often. Because there's just so many topics in there and I enjoy it so much. But give them like a good 7 or 8 minute kind of spiel as to why these things are important, where we should be taking them right now in the markets that we're at. Give them something to take away. I
want to back up and comment on something you said. So when we talk about the business side, I was on the radio for 20 years, and on the radio you have to paint a picture. I didn't have this luxury that Robert has.
Yeah.
So I became really good at analogies and painting pictures. So when I teach business fundamentals. I did it at Cox Business School for a very short period of time. I do it in my mentoring and my teaching classes. But one of the things I teach is a SWOT analysis. You'll never hear me say SWOT analysis. You always hear me talk about what your strengths are, identifying your weaknesses, what are the opportunities, and what are the threats that exist. Well, the threats are the competition and the lack of product. The opportunities are out there everywhere. You'll find them. The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, I talked about that. I won't expand upon it. We've talked about it before. Your strengths, your strengths, or maybe you don't. You need to become aware of them. And what are your weaknesses? That is a SWOT analysis. It's part of a business plan. When we talk about business plan, it freaks people out. So when I teach in a manner that is very digestible. Okay, it's palatable. The other thing is you talk about, I'm looking at my notes. You talk about how I'm very secure. I'm very secure and confident. However, the reason I became secure and confident is because years ago I identified what my value is. I identified my foundational tools. So let me give you some more background on George, because there are so many people who feel insecure. I was so insecure with myself, had a narcissistic father, has a big heart, but I never felt good enough, put me down. and in every way possible. Didn't use the words to do it, but how are you going to do that? That's not good enough. Why are you doing that? And just questioning everything in a manner that was derogatory and oppressive. Okay. Again, big heart, horrible tools. The reason I say that is because I was involved with martial arts. I've been on Ripley's, believe it or not. I did modeling. I did all these things. I was a big bodybuilder, all these things that had to do with my physical strength to push through something, to show that I'm worthy. And it wasn't until I was able to package all of this, do the foundational work, make the changes I needed to, that the weight started coming off, all the muscle weight started coming off. I stopped being so hard on myself and so hard on other people. And the foundation that really holds the house together was formed, not a cracked foundation. And so for the people who are insecure, you can get out of it. Just do this work and be prepared. If you don't prepare, you repair and you stay insecure. That's the only reason I became really secure, Robert, is because of all the work I've done to identify my value and the value I have to offer others.
George, that is an incredible, I mean, from a genuine standpoint, the way you said that, there are so many people that do have these problems and struggle. And I loved your, God, there's probably millions that just identified just those words that you said on why they were like that or why they felt like that. But I more loved your antidote was, well, I'll just go and I'll do good at this, or I'll do good at that. And I'll lift weights. I'll get money, be successful, whatever. But in the end, you didn't finish with, that's what made you, in the end, you finished with, well, I realized that I don't need those things. I'm already like that. And I can do it however I want to do that. And I think that's the piece that a lot of them miss. I think they. But
the challenge, the hard work and strength it took did not come from any piece of my body, which I was trying to force through strength before. It came from my mind and emotional state. That's what changed everything. So at the end of the day, you have to really want to change and be successful. Otherwise, you'll stay in your own way, and it's no one else's fault but your own. But you have to recognize it.
Yeah, God, I can't think of a better way to end the show with that. That's just so it's just not even enough justice. And I really am thrilled for all the people that are going to watch this next week and the week after. And I'm probably going to do at least 2 or 3 posts on this one, a little bit more than normal, just because of the information that Sony got. The end of the whole thing is good, but God, the ending was so strong. And so many people were like, I'm thinking in my own head, how many people I've interacted with in the past week that would benefit from just listening to this particular episode. George, before we go, I want to do a favor here for you, because we do have a lot of real estate agents. Give them your pitch on who you work with, what you do, your availability, your number. Get them out. Let them see that, man.
Thank you for that, Robert, but I'm not here to boast about myself.
Look at that.
I would just rather look, if you're watching this and you see value in this and I can add value to your life, that's all I want. You see my name on the screen, find me, friend me on social media, reach out to me. If you want to send me your email, I'll put you in my CRM. I send out daily rates and other valuable content. And then if we can work together, I'd love that. And it's a continued relationship. I can help you with marketing content and just keep adding value to you.
Yeah,
so thank you for that, Mark.
That's such a professional answer there. God, I love that. And, if you can't tell George's heart by the way he said that, he just did it. And I love that Mark already had his information ready to go anyway. So, but look at that. He doesn't know that's coming, and that's the way he answers. I just think it's, one of the hundreds and thousands of things that he does that's just outstanding. George, I want to thank you today, one, for being a friend, being a great business partner, but God, just being so motivational to so many people out there. They're so fortunate to be able to hear you. And I know I've always been fortunate, and I always pride myself in meeting people that make me better and make me listen. And I always enjoy that with you. So I want to thank you greatly for that. I want to thank everybody that continues to watch the show. I really do appreciate all the archives and the comments that we get back, the watching that we get. So many people watch the show throughout the week when it's convenient to them. And we like to think it's because we are presenting a great deal of value. We are almost approaching 3 years of running this show every single week with topics that are literally never the same and something new. So we find a lot of value in the show. We find we continue to have a lot of regular and loyal listeners to that. So always never be afraid to pass that on to somebody else, send it to them. Always targeting new agents, regular agents out there, and even management agents who think their agents need a little more help in the learning process. This is always a good show for them.
Robert, real fast, I encourage anybody watching this who's a part-time agent that is not with Robert, or even full-time, if you're not happy with your agency, I sent a person to Robert because they weren't getting the support they needed. And now they're with Robert and very happy with the support they have. I mean, very happy. They feel like somebody's actually helping them through the process and not let them fall off. So I encourage you to at least talk with Robert.
And that guy's been great. That gentleman there, he has been nothing but happy since coming over. So that is great, because there are some openings for some people that you might not be happy where you are. And it's not because of the broker, the person you're with. It's just not a good fit. And there's always someone else that has that right fit. So I really appreciate that, because that guy, I keep waiting for him to do one of his first closes in there, because he certainly has the potential. So I always love having him with us. Y'all, thank you again.
Thank you, Robert.
Wonderful. Y'all have a great rest of the week. Keep cruising on into July. We will be back next week with always a new topic. Appreciate everything. Y'all take care. Have a good rest of the week.
Bye-bye.